unmute and tell them you can't hear them.
Oh, here it is.
Sometimes they aren't saying it. Wait for them.
My hair is straight, and so that'll go out when you rest. Trying to convince people. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Bend Metropolitan Planning Organization. We have a full agenda today. So I'm going to say thank you to Juan, who is here helping us with technology from the city of Bend, and to Cameron, who is our recorder. We will go ahead and call roll for the policy board. Tyler, do you want to do that, please? Just the three members of the policy board.
Yes, Barb Campbell,
I am here, thank you.
Mario Mendez, Townsend, and I believe Chris Doty is here in place of Commissioner Phil Chang today.
Present.
There's Chris, thank you. We appreciate you being here, Chris.
No problem.
Then how about if everyone else, if you would introduce yourselves if you're doing presentations or speaking, is that all right? We're running a little short on time. So instead of introducing everyone right up here at the front of the meeting. Tyler, will you tell us about the hybrid meeting guidelines, please?
Yep. So if you're online, you can just raise your hand if you have questions and we will be monitoring it. So we will let you jump in and join us. And I think that's the main thing. This meeting's being recorded. And you can also turn on closed captioning by hitting the CC button, which should be viewable on the bottom of your screen if you are logged into the meeting.
Thank you. And now we've got an opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment for the Bend MPO?
We do have one person, Leslie Barber, is online and would like to speak.
Go
Yes,
right
I'm here.
ahead.
Hi, my name is Leslie Barber, and I am a resident of Bend, near the off of Simpson Avenue. And in your last two meetings, you were discussing the Core Community Land Trust funding. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a neighbor perspective on that housing development on Simpson Avenue. Core gave us a presentation to the Century West Neighborhood Association on May 21. And it was an off-the-record presentation, and neighborhood feedback was not official, therefore not collected or shared with officials. In that meeting, there were many questions asked by attendees to Core about the parking and vehicle trips on Simpson. And Housing Works, that project has not provided any transparency on their project yet. As you know, at certain points in the development, there are official notifications that go out to people that live within 250 feet of that development. And for some of us that are impacted by this project, we don't get that notice. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that the Core transportation consultant called Transite Consulting said that the project alone, the Core project alone, will generate 579 weekday daily trips and 50 workday PM daily trips in the peak hours. And that's for 40 households. So this analysis does not talk about the additional 60 households that Housing Works is contemplating on Simpson Avenue, nor does the analysis contemplate any of the OSU Cascades trips that are going to be generated by 5,000 people on that campus. So in the presentation to the Neighborhood Association, they talked about 3 on-street parking spaces on 18th Street. So there are no parking bays contemplated for either side of Simpson Avenue, even though their own transportation consultant said that the Core project should or could consider parking bays in front of their project on Simpson Avenue, and include that with their application to you. There is no other parking considered on Simpson on the other side of the road either for the OSU Cascade situation. So you all at the last meeting rejected the trees between the sidewalk and the street. And I'm wondering if you would consider a conversation with CORE about parking bays with limited time parking to relieve some of this vehicular congestion on Simpson.
Thank you so much, Leslie. If you could please send me an email. My name is Barb Campbell, and you can find my email at the City of Bend website.
Yeah.
And I can get you talking to the right people about parking for those developments. And then I would like to say that although we decided that we were not going to provide the funding for street trees, the street trees are still required and will still be put in with that project.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. I
Okay.
did not realize that when you rejected the funding that street trees were out of the project.
Oh, no, the City of Bend requires them. It's just that CORE is going to find different funding for that. So Leslie, I'm going to let you go now, and I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll get back to you on parking for those projects, all right?
Okay, I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you. Thanks for speaking.
All right.
Anyone else? Of course. Have a nice day. Anyone else for public comment today? All right, that brings us on to item number 4, which is to approve the April 21st, 2023 Policy Board draft meeting minutes. I'd look for a motion.
To approve the April 21st, 2023 Policy Board draft meeting minutes as presented.
Bob, you want to?
I wasn't present that meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can go ahead and I can second that myself. Yep, and we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Okay, that passes with Bob abstaining.
Thank you.
So Cameron, we have a motion from Councilor Mendez and a second from myself, and it passed 2-1 with ODOT abstaining.
All right, thank you.
Voted yes. Yep. Thank you very much. All right, that takes us to agenda item number 5. And this is our Unified Planning Work Program. And Tyler Dickey will take us through this.
All right, so I'll ask the board a question first. We've walked through most of these slides during a prior policy board meeting as well as at our budget committee. And so do you want me just to hit a few highlights and then move towards adoption? You might walk through the whole set of slides or the whole group of slides that we have for this topic. And this is for adoption of our work program for the next 2 year, the 2023 to 2025 biennium.
What's that? Highlights would be fine. Thank you.
Okay. So just walk through some of the things that are underway right now. Just hit on a few things. One of the things that we will be that's further down on the agenda is adoption of the 2024 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program. Andrea completed the Surface Transportation Block Grant Funding Distribution process. Early in the year, she completed an update to the Public Participation Plan. We're in the midst of doing some transportation safety outreach and implementation right now throughout Central Oregon. The Travel Mobility Hubs feasibility study was a major undertaking between the city, MPO, and Cascades East Transit. A few other things, federal COVID funding, which I think you're all very familiar with over our last few meetings, getting those funds distributed out to projects in the community. Starting work right now on updating our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is our long-range planning document for the MPO area, and that will be looking out to the year 2045. And then just engaged in a lot of statewide efforts related to household travel survey and other things. Priorities for us for the next biennium. The biggest priority is getting that Metropolitan Transportation Plan update completed. That is due in September of 2024. So that'll be our primary focus over the next year and a half. Additional work around the safety planning. Possible update to the Transportation Safety Action Plan. Some work related to census, continuing to support ODOT on some of the planning projects they have underway within the MPO area. And then this slide just shows some additional detailed work of things that we'll be working on as well over the next 2 years. Any questions so far?
Don't think so. Thank you.
All right. And then I'm just going to kind of skip through these slides, but our work program, we've had the same format for a long time. And so we have 4 major work tasks and then a series of subtasks under them. Our first one is development and program management. So that's our committee work, work program development, external coordination that we do with other MPOs around the state, public participation efforts, as well as some Title VI and environmental justice work. Task 2 is short range planning. That includes maintenance of our transportation improvement program, some of our federally required performance monitoring and tracking, development of our annual federal funding report, interagency coordination, and then coordination that we do with Cascades East Transit. Long range planning task 3. The big item here is the maintenance and update to our long range plan, and then transportation safety, climate change work that's happening at the state level and ultimately going to be happening at the local level, as well as participation in ODOT-led planning efforts within the area. And then task 4 is transportation modeling and data collection work. And there's a lot happening under this item, both in this current fiscal year and will be over the next 2 years. The other.
I think, Rob, have you got a question, Robin? Oh, I'm sorry. I saw your hand. It's okay. Sorry, Tyler.
All right. Yeah, I'm just going through these quickly just because we have a big agenda. So if you have any questions, just yell at me. COVID relief funding, we've already allocated the vast majority of those funds at the last 2 meetings. We're going to have presentations later today to potentially award some additional funding out of that program. This slide just shows our overall budget summary. And you can see that, our funding, we have 3 primary funding sources. FHWA PL, if you can read that on the left, top left, that's the biggest chunk of funding that we get. That's from the Federal Highway Administration. We also get some Federal Transit Administration funding. And then we utilize some of the federal surface transportation block grant funds that come through the MPO to boost our operating budget. And then the other item that's on there is ODOT safety funds, and that is grant funding that we are receiving from ODOT's safety division to do some of the regional safety planning work within Central Oregon. And just a little bit of where we are in the schedule. We had a lengthy and detailed review with ODOT staff, FHWA and FTA staff back in early February. We walked through this document, the draft document, with the technical advisory committee as well as the board in February. We had our budget committee meeting in late April, and we've had our public review of the draft posted now for the last month and a half, something like that. And we only received 1 public comment, and that was someone just requesting additional work related to railroad crossings within the MPO area.
Greg, looks like Greg has his hand up.
Greg?
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. Muted, Greg.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I know from an operating budget, if you look at your detail that you had on is figure 6 on page 22. You have professional services consulting, and you had revised 2022, so 418 was 20,000. Then you had in projections for that year is 526,000, and then you had an estimated for 23-24 of 339,000. And my question, and I haven't gotten a good question as to what kind of consulting are we doing here? Unless this is something else, and I'd like to talk to somebody in the county to understand that when I get back.
Yeah, so I think you were breaking up a little bit, but I think you were asking about our consultant funding line item in the
That's
detail.
correct.
Yeah, so currently and into our next fiscal year, I mean, the items that we have for consulting, we currently have 2 consultant contracts out helping us with updating our regional travel model. We have one with MIG and the other with DKS helping with that effort, and those will extend into this next fiscal year.
Okay.
We're getting ready to issue an RFP for support to update our long-range plan. And we're hoping that'll be getting posted here, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And that'll be that's going to be a pretty sizable consultant contract. And then also under consultant contracts or consultant funding, Cameron's contract to provide minutes falls under that.
Right.
Am I missing anything, Andrea? Those are the primary items that we have under there.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. But those are big numbers. That's the reason why I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. And Cameron, that's Greg Bryant, and he serves on the MPO Technical Advisory Committee.
I know, thank you.
Of course, thank you. And Tyler, I'll let you go ahead and continue.
Yeah, and so today we are just looking for policy board review and possible adoption of the draft 2023 to 2025 Unified Planning Work Program. For this item, I don't think we need to have a public hearing. That's language that was in there for next month for our budget when we adopt the budget for the MPO.
Okay. Any other questions? Greg, your hand is still up, your digital hand. And then the only other, I might ask specifically, Chris, just Phil didn't have any concerns about this.
I don't believe so.
Okay, that's having Phil absent today is the only reason but as long as he hasn't expressed any concerns to either of us or to Chris, I think we are ready to go ahead and look for a motion.
One quick question.
Of course.
Yes.
What's the process for if you find in the next 2 years that you need to update this, whether there's a grant doesn't work out or
Yep.
another one comes in, what's the process look like for amending it?
Well, at a minimum, we will have our work programs. This is the first time we've done this. We've always had annual work programs in the past, and we're moving to a 2-year work program. But our budget document is an annual document. That's per state law. We have to have an annual budget. So at a minimum, next year from now, we'll be checking in with the board or in the spring of 2024 and reviewing everything at that point in time. And so that'll be our main check-in point. But I think if something else happens, we have a process. We have language in the document itself in terms of being able to amend our work program. And I think, one of the things that's in there, probably not in the first year, but in the second year is doing this like a strategic plan for the MPO. I think if we step through that process, that very well could inform some changes to this document.
Very good. Thank you, Tyler. I move to adopt the 2023 to 25 Unified Planning Work Program by means of resolution 2023-02.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Mendez and a second from Bob Townsend. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
And that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Ready to get to work. That brings us to agenda item number 6, which is our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program adoption. And Tyler will talk to us about this one.
Actually, I'm going to hand it off to Andrea.
Oh, I'm sorry, Andrea.
Yeah, so this is for adoption consideration of our MTIP or Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. So our first slide here is what is the MTIP? So it's our list of federally funded projects that are programmed over the next 4 years. It is updated as projects change through amendments. We do need to have a full update to the document every 4 years. does need to be in sync with ODOT's statewide transportation improvement program. The document needs to be approved by the MPO and the governor. Oh, Greg, do you have your hand up again? Or is that still? Oh, he's
Yes,
frozen up. Okay.
There, perfect.
So this slide just shows, the MPO's tip and the ODOT's. So for the MPO, it's projects within the MPO area, and for ODOT's, it's projects throughout the state. And the STIP incorporates projects from every MPO's MTIP. And ours is approved, of course, at the local level, and theirs is approved at the statewide level, at the state level. In the TIP document, we do have to show how the projects listed in there support our federal performance measures. So I think it was last month that we went over the performance measures. So this is just a shortened list of a few of the projects that are in our list, and then simply showing the different performance measure topics and if that project does or does not support that specific performance measure. Here's a funding summary. So a total of about 39 million in funding for our MTIP over these next 4 years. And that's between Bend MPO projects, transit, City of Bend, and ODOT. And the next few slides are the project list, all the projects listed in it, but broken up by entity. So this slide is just Bend MPO projects are actually funding sources. So we have our surface transportation block grant funds, the ones that remained with the MPO and went to our competitive project application process, and then our planning funds. And then next slide are the City of Bend projects. So we have the RT bridge replacements, and then the STBG amounts that went for maintenance and preservation of the streets. Here are the ODOT projects listed in our MTIP. So Bike Boulevard treatments on Norton, the multi-use trail between Baker Road and Lava Butte, some safety projects, the Revere Avenue rail crossing, and then a traffic signal replacement on US 20 at 3rd Street and Empire.
Question.
Yeah.
What's the, and maybe this is a question for Bob
Sure.
too. What's the process like for working with other districts and agencies? For example, the Lava Butte trail, which sounds amazing, to make sure that it connects to something else once it gets to Knox Road. I'd heard that Parks District was working with ODOT to make sure that their plans align so that it's not just like, here's a trailhead that doesn't connect to anything. It would be great to have it, connect to the internal network in the city too.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is just the timing of it. I mean, certainly Bend Parks and Rec long-term plan actually shows a trail connection on the north side of Baker, or the east side of 97, north side of Baker there, but that's not going to be within the next 3 to 5 years. And yet we got federal funding for our trail. And so there will be a disconnect on what a trailhead looks like on that north end. We are going to have some parking areas on the south side of Baker, but we've also entered into a partnership with High Desert Museum where they're going to expand their parking area so that we'll have a pseudo trailhead midstream as well. But yeah, so there's coordination, but it's still the timing is not going to line up for where they're at.
It's still ongoing then?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not complete or finalized.
No, but the plan is we've actually applied for additional federal funds to expand and work with Bend Parks and Rec on building a full trailhead north of the sooner than later. We were rejected the first time, but we're going to reapply again, just trying to your point. It doesn't make sense if they don't happen to get, I mean, it's still a long-term connection, right? Not everything can happen at once, but there will be issues there if we don't have a trailhead site and our trail opens.
Sounds great. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
You can go to the next slide. So there are 3 slides here that go over transit projects or actual transit funding sources, but they are essentially just three different funding sources, but they're broken down by each year. So it looks like a number of projects, but these are for capital funding, service, and for some rural, I believe. Yeah. So again, these 3 different slides, but they're all essentially just three projects. And that's it for our project list in the MTIP. Yeah.
Thank you. I was wanting to ask City of Bend, David, thank you for being here today. Back years ago, we had a separate line item for the City of Bend for green paint in bike lanes. And there were some tumultuous years of the MPO, and then the MPO calmed down. And when the MPO calmed down, you said that it would be easier for you, just paperwork, to get one contribution instead of one that's $600,000 and one that's $20,000. So we combined those 2. Can you just assure me that, yeah, you're still using some green paint for bike lanes?
Yeah, in fact, the crews are just getting started, as you may have seen downtown. Got the paint truck out this winter, kind of teased us there. We kind of went from winter straight to summer.
Yes,
Feels
we did.
like, so normally we would have been able to get out earlier striping, but with the freezing nights and temperatures, paint trucks held in, calibrated. They kind of did some testing out on section 1 northeast of town, and now focusing on the downtown area and green, replenishing some of the green paint down there will be a part of that effort.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Counselor, I also asked David to come to the board, is it June or July? One or the other. We will have, David's going to just give a presentation, come on the bigger maintenance operations preservation, how the MPO fit in.
I think that would be a great idea. Councilor Mendez is relatively new to this organization. This has been an ongoing contribution for a while. So yeah, an update will be great. We'll look forward to that later.
Happy to.
this year. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So this slide is just informative that we do have on if you were to Google ODOT STIP project tracker, you will see the projects, the MPOs for Region 4, the MPOs, MTIP projects in there, and they are updated as amendments happen, which can be useful. So here's our timeline. Back in October of 2022, there was an initial draft review to the policy board. And then in April, we started our 21-day public comment period. We reviewed this document with the TAC at their last meeting. And then here we are today, final review and adoption consideration. And then basically from now until around September, October, the MPO will maintain the 2 different MTIPs. And in July, the OTC is expected to adopt this next step, which the MTIP will be part of. And then finally in September, FHWA approval. So public comments received. We did receive, a fair number of comments listed in our public comment period. It was advertised a few different ways. It was on the news clip and a number of other things. So we did get some general comments that weren't necessarily specific to the projects in the MTIP. One individual expressed that they wanted more separated multi-use paths for safety and comfort level when biking particularly. And then another individual had some current concerns about traffic and growth in Southeast Bend, a need for an east side bypass, the parkway should be closed to city traffic. Really just a number of things, implement residential parking permits, the need for more bike lanes and a bike ped overpass over 97, no transportation utility fee. And then another individual asked that the Reed Market Railroad overpass be prioritized. It was specific comments related to projects in the MTIP. One was that to ensure that the Archie Bridges projects include bike ped improvements. They will, and so the rest of these comments were from a few different Bend Bikes members, so they've submitted the same comments, and I do have responses to all these, which I haven't sent out yet, but I will to these individuals. And then also for the bike boulevard on Northeast Norton, they don't believe that that's a reasonable alternative to Greenwood, but I did get a detailed response from ODOT as to why that configuration is the way it is. And then the trail from Baker Road to La Alliance should access High Desert Museum, and it does. And let's see, bike ped improvements at Revere Crossing project are important. Yes, include bike ped intersections improvements at Empire and US 20. And I believe that those are planned.
Yeah, I mean, it's just 250,000 for some high level planning. So there'll be, when we program construction funds and other things, there'll be more opportunities for public comment, but it's a to be determined on what that project may plan out.
Yeah, and I've just, on that one, we've gotten I've gotten just some comments from a couple of folks about that one as well. So I reached out to city staff and ODOT planning staff, because I know there's just some PE, like planning and maybe some PE funding set aside for that intersection. And I said, my question was, why don't we look at all of Empire from Obi Riley, through the interchange, and could we figure out some way to fund that? And so there's an email chain going right now trying to figure out if we can make that happen. It would be an approach like is happening right now between the city and ODOT on Reed Market Road and that project. That planning effort that's underway. And so that's something that may happen, but we're a little ways out yet in terms of being able to figure out how we're going to fund it, when it's going to happen, and who will lead it. But that discussion's happening.
And then can I ask about the Archie Briggs Bridge? It's just one, isn't it? Maybe I'm looking at you, David.
There's two bridges there.
Oh, there are two. Am I right in saying they are bridges within the city of Bend, and all facilities within the city of Bend must have at least the very minimum bike and pedestrian facilities?
Yeah, the bridges include bike and sidewalks.
Yeah.
Bike lanes and sidewalks.
Good. Yeah, no, these are excellent comments. If anybody's listening, they could also be submitted to the Bend City Council. Most of these are Bend specific. And then the only one, I don't know how we're going to close the parkway to city traffic, but it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Greg, I see you've got your hand up.
See if I can unmute it.
Yeah, my question is on the Baker Road to Lava Lands. So has that trail been finalized to be on the west side of 97, Bob?
That's what the plans are now. We still don't have, we have to go through a planning approval process to finalize that, but that's where the plans exist, and that's what we're applying for.
Okay. Because
Oh, wait,
I know
sorry.
if you're,
Sorry.
yeah, I
It's-
know if you went on the east side, you'd have to either go over or under to get to the high desert. So, yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
yeah, just for clarification, Greg, it's east side to High Desert, west side to Lava View. I thought we were just talking about from High Desert Museum South, but it does go from Baker Road on the east side to Lava View, under crossing to the west side. That's what the current plans are.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions about any of the MTIP? Andrea, I think that was the last slide. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it is.
If there are no more questions, I think we're ready for a motion.
I move to adopt the 2024 to 2027 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program by means of resolution 2023-03.
Second.
Right, we have a motion from Councilor Mendez and a second from Mr. Townsend. All those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye, and that's unanimous. Let's go. Great. That brings us on to agenda item number 7. This is our federal COVID funding. We have been doing an excellent job distributing these funds, and we've still got some left. Tyler, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm not going to walk through everything on this slide, but this shows how much funding we received in total. We received a little more than $1.5 million back in 2021. And we've investigated lots and lots of different ideas for these funds. Over the last 2 MPO board meetings, we've allocated the vast majority of these 2 projects for the city of Bend, Cascades East Transit, and then to a combined project, the Affordable Housing Project on Simpson Avenue, which is a joint project between Housing Works and the Core Community Land Trust. We have a balance of funding of about $291,000 remaining. And we have, today, we're going to have City of Bend staff are going to talk about a request, or they're going to have a request for funding for the Hunnell Road, Roble Road intersection traffic signal, and also improvements to Cooley Road near just east of the railroad tracks. So with that, I will let city staff jump in and run it.
I'm Janet Ruby with the City of Bend Transportation and Mobility Department. And the first item to talk about today, we started it last meeting and ran out of time at the end. And so briefly, both of the projects we submitted, of course, we have more projects and needs than money we have anywhere, right? So we looked at like what are ones that had some sort of nexus to businesses, right? And the variety of applications of COVID funding, but we were looking at connectivity to business, getting people easily to businesses versus ordering online, right? And making it easier. And so the North Corridor came up, and initially I was like, well, we don't have issues. We've got a need, but we're gonna chip away at it. But then the signal detector went down, and we realized kind of the vulnerability of that signal. And at the same time, all the North Corridor projects are going on. So we kind of looked at our funding, talked about their funding, which is less than our funding, 0 impact for signal maintenance at this point, and for city stuff, let alone their own stuff. And so we put together an estimate for $87,000 to upgrade the signal, to put a new controller in, to upgrade the push buttons to accessible push buttons, and to add radar detection, which can detect pets and bikes a little bit, bikes in the bike lane, as well as improve our ability to run the timing of that, which is going to be critical as we're doing all the different detours in there. So ODOT had already contributed the funding and replaced the ATC. We were able to include that in a part of the project. Did some scrambling last Friday to put in a temporary camera instead of doing leak detection for the broken left turn lane. And so we're here today. We have 50,000 in our, we have 37,000 in our signal fund that we've juggled some other priorities around to be able to improve the signal, and are requesting 50,000 today. And so the next slide, I think I've gone through this already about why we want to improve this intersection. Just a kind of quick summary, we have 34 traffic signals. We're working on ATC controller upgrades on all of our signals, which we hope to do by the end of next year. Then we'll start the process of upgrading our detection to radar detection, which can better pick up bikes, bike lanes. And we have 11 signals that are on our short-term list, which is the next slide. And we're making some good progress with MPO funding's help of chipping away at either working on designs or coming up in the next coming years to work through our signals. So of note is we're also working on accessibility and evaluation for our pen buttons and the countdown timers. So a few more to do here. So next slide. That's it. So last time, I think one of the questions was like, what is the nexus between the COVID funding in this area? This is part of that. This is just the idea of the more easy you can make it. And again, this is maybe more driving focused, but also will improve pedestrian connections across the road there, though there's not that many today yet. But if we can help facilitate access in that area during construction. I think that helped. Any other
Janet,
questions?
Barb, just to add in real quick on the, as of yet, the ODOT North Corridor project is putting in a transit bus stop right near that intersection.
you. Yeah.
corner of the intersection.
Northeast
Yes.
corner, well, on north side of Roble, just east of the intersection, there'll be a brand new transit stop there.
Oh.
And so safety of this intersection, improved pedestrian access and use through that intersection ties right into that as well.
And I remember that we required, if we think it's gonna be Costco, that development to put in, I think it's a mini mobility hub, but a bus stop.
Yeah.
Right, and we required that development to, in general, to have bike and pedestrian funding, even though we got comments of nobody's walking and biking up there. And so, but, you know, it's true, that area is changing. We are building that infrastructure to encourage other uses, and new housing is going in.
Yeah,
that area.
there's new housing.
Exactly, right? So, you know, for myself, for so many years, that intersection has felt like almost internal to parking lots. You know, it hardly even has felt like a real road, but the times they are changing, you know, it is a road now. And there is an intersection, a traffic light that is actually broken. Correct?
It's repaired now.
It's
but
repaired, it needs.
It's got a Band-Aid on it.
Not in top-notch operating condition.
Yeah, there you go.
So what are the alternative sources of funding for this? And
Mhm.
if this doesn't get funded, what does that look like? Could, for example, would this intersection be eligible for the intelligent signal systems and of the money in the GO bond that's dedicated for this kind of work?
Possibly, but not likely, because the short-term funding doesn't start until July of next year, and then that's pretty well descripted to 27 Third Street.
Intelligent systems?
Yes,
signal,
our first chunk of funding that comes with that, so it's all geared to 27 Third Street, so it'd be maybe possible to juggle some stuff around, but unlikely. Our next funding is we have $50,000 a year budgeted for all of the traffic signals, chipping away at these head buttons. And so we'd wait another year and I could have $87,000 next year. That's all I spent my money on for the whole signal cycle. First whole next year, that would be the one project.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I feel like this is, you know, it's between two state highways. It's a really big intersection. I'd be more interested in looking at other funding sources for this project, especially given the potential to reduce the funding for transportation in particular. That seems like very high need, and this is obviously, there's some urgency to it. I feel like we might find some funding from other more suitable sources.
We'll keep looking, but I don't know that there is any, because we're not reconstructing, right? There's not plans to reconstruct this intersection, so it's just a signal.
What's the timeline? What the Costco development look like for this intersection?
Pardon?
The Costco development
Doesn't change it,
doesn't change it.
no. Look at development review. I just asked if they were required to do any modifications.
It seems like.
I think it's built to our width. Do you remember if it's changing the curbs? I thought it was
No.
not, right? So they're building within the existing cross section.
Yeah, maintenance is pretty much on the same developer. So it was originally built by the development. So it's not upgraded or maintained by developers. It's gonna be city update.
It can be required to be upgraded by the development. It was just chosen not to. I mean, you have that ability when development goes.
And I think they weren't
Yeah.
changing the curves or the cross section there.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a nexus to say do what was more maintenance oriented on the signal.
Yeah, just, I mean, I mentioned this the last couple times, right? And I understand there's needs throughout the system, right? Tomorrow I could make a list of 30 things that I think could use 200,000. We're just not doing that because we don't think these aren't just Band-Aid funds here or there. They're unique funds that can be spent on anything, right? Like you mentioned the trailhead, we could use another 300,000 to expand the trailhead for, you know, Lava View. We have other trail systems up north where we had to stop sidewalk along Third. I just have a real, the other things we funded were really unique type of ventures that I'm just not, comfortable from ODOT supporting, these one-offs right now, because I think there could be something that we can't pay, like the equipment we bought, right? For ODOT can't buy equipment for that. You can't, right? That was a real need. These other ones, what if the COVID funding wasn't available for this? We would find a way to repair it, right? And so I just have a little bit of, I've expressed it before, but have a little bit of difficulty using these funds for something that there are other buckets for. We're just choosing priorities, and why not to use those other buckets? Likewise with the next presentation too, sidewalk infill. We all have sidewalk infill needs, right? And so do we want to, do we just go with the first presenters here, or do we list 50 of them across the city and state here and just say, hey, we'd rather fund this one? And so just, express that.
I gotta say, I feel a little awkward by hearing that, because I felt like we were asked to bring this forward of what you have on your list that could be related, right? So it was, and I thought I was coming with ODOT support. If I had known that, we would have just said, fine, we'll keep it.
Yeah,
I feel like put in a weird spot here by the hearing.
Yeah, I don't mean to be critical of it.
No,
I
that's
wasn't at the last meeting. It was the time before that, I had expressed our thoughts around the COVID funds and what we thought they were intended for, and not simple capital investments here and here and here, because we all have those lists. And
again, we have way more needs to do all sorts of different projects related.
Yeah, the maintenance O&M is a long list, and was trying to focus on safety and connectivity or infill in a. With a lot.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of what we're trying to do is, right, where we're building something, can we at least try and complete all the little connections related to that, so that we stop building spot things.
No, and then for me, I think it's just seeing them all together then, right? And I have a real hesitancy up here, because I know we can require the developers, and the Caraway, we can make them make improvements at whatever intersection we deem necessary, because they're affecting it all. So I just, with all that growth up there, I have a real hesitancy spending money on these type of things. I would rather, we've all talked about the sidewalk infill on Third Street where we're building trails and not under our project. I would rather use 300,000 there, but I don't think that's warranted either. I think I should try to find other funds. So
I'm so sorry, Chris, you've had your hand up. I'm sorry, Bob.
Thank you. And Tyler, could you clarify it's been a while. The origin of these funds is COVID related, but was it not meant to offset the loss that local government had due to lower vehicle miles traveled, lesser funding through the state highway fund that local government received? Is this from that allocation via ODOT, via the feds?
That's correct.
So in that regard, these funds are simply funds that the city did not get because of COVID, that would normally come in through its state highway fund allocation. So while its arrival may be unique and opportunities may be unique, these funds are really just revenue that normally would have come in, that would have paid for exactly something like this. And so I support what city staff is promoting here, and I recognize the unique opportunities of the funding and how it's arrived. Really, the nexus of it was just to offset what didn't happen because of the pandemic, not to pay for anything that's extraordinary.
If I might.
Go ahead.
And so this might be jumping ahead a little bit to Tyler's last slide on this topic, but I'm sympathetic to Bob's comments, and the one thing that I'd hope to see come before us in the near future is the proposal to do something that we tried to do during COVID, the Stay Healthy Streets Initiative, which was like an active transportation initiative to try to get people to get out and exercise and recreate in a healthy and safe way. And the city didn't have the funding to really execute that properly. And so we had chatted, and I had talked to the city manager, Eric King, to encourage the city to come up with a proposal that might look like an extension of the Stay Healthy Streets program. That would be kind of a pilot project to really beef up the network of greenways that the city has, using potentially funding for quick builds or some of the planning related to that idea that, in my view, is related to what we experienced during the pandemic, but is a unique kind of project that have a network-wide effect, but there's currently no existing funding for. So I feel like, from my perspective, I'd at least like to hold off, and I know there's an urgent need, but to try to evaluate it more holistically in the context of what this funding could also be used for. And I think that might be consistent with Bob's previous comments about holding some in reserve. So I would be in favor of just holding off for now for this amount of funding anyway.
So that just by the vote means we need to at least table this. It's not gonna, if we're tied and ODOT's out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic to the need. I guess what I would just ask as a clarifier is, I'd like to hold the money, but if we want to spend it on something, I would just offer, let's make a priority list next time and let's all bring them, because we all have a list of things between the city, the state, the county may within the MPO. And if we are, then, that may be an alternate to decide, like, okay, if we do spend it, this is how it's going, or we decide to hold it from there. But I just feel like as I saw the agenda in this topic, I'm like, gosh, I think we have a couple more that are probably better suited than this one. And nothing against that, but certainly the Cooley one is one that I don't feel comfortable with at all. This one's a little bit more of a need because it's imminent, and I can see that. But that would be another suggestion I may have, that if we do want to spend this last 300 and not sit on it forever, that we just point in time, and whether we get full presentations or we just have generic lists, I think we all know the projects.
Thank you so much. I am so sorry. I
Oh, that's
never would
fine.
want to
Yeah.
waste your time. From my perspective, that proposal, as well as the one on Cooley Road, we didn't really explore them. We were focused on those bigger asks at the previous meeting. And so I'm the one that asked you to come back and
Yeah.
talk to us about this again.
Still
And the
good
same with
opportunity.
David on that Cooley. But it sounds to me like the people that are present here today, we're not going to go anywhere with any more of this COVID funding today, is what I'm hearing. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, that's granted, the city has a collective vote and county
Yeah,
spoken.
right. And I'm feeling much better. For me, the money was losing value. Every day we didn't spend it. Inflation is going so fast. I'm feeling better now that most of the money has been allocated, and feeling like we can go ahead and slow down, take another step back on the rest. I think Bob's got an excellent point. Where would this fall? Presumably you did see this as the top priority for you among the city.
And I don't necessarily top priority, but it was the best application, not something that something else wouldn't be funding in the short term that
Right.
fit sort of business relief.
Right.
Yeah.
But I completely understand what you're saying, Bob. I was
Plenty of opportunity.
literally driving to this meeting thinking exactly that same thing, that maintenance, funding is really hard to find. Flexible funding is really hard to find. Construction funding, not so much. We can find money to build new stuff. And, in my car, I was literally thinking, maybe we should just buy another of those sweepers. David Abbas has told me one is not it. And money for a sweeper is really, really hard to find. So, I'm afraid we're kind of muddled again. And it is because, this money really is very special, and we can do anything transportation related with it. So from what I'm seeing, I think maybe we'll just go ahead and move on with the agenda today. Is that all right with you? Okay. And Chris Doty, what do you think? Is that kind of all right with your perspective?
Yeah, I'm not gonna die on my sword over this. Did think I'd want to point out the fact that these funds were funds that were not received by your streets division through the state highway fund. They're only in the hands of the MPO because they took a different path, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, Chris, and, and thank you for that, that refocus that COVID caused a lack of funding for transportation. Fewer people were driving means less gas tax. That means this COVID funding, yeah, it's for transportation, right? So thank you, everybody. It's such a good discussion and yeah, Tyler.
So do you want, just a clarification for us as staff,
Yeah.
do you want us to work with all of our member entities, over the next month or so and come back in July or August with a potential list of projects?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay?
I guess I would make a friendly request
Yes.
related to this experience.
Of
If
course.
there is some better guidelines as to like, is it more active transfer? Is there something more specific? 'Cause again,
Yes.
we have so many needs, right? We have
Yes.
$1 billion transportation
Right.
plan that we're funding 200 million. So
Right.
any direction you can get to help shape that would
Exactly.
be great.
So
Yeah.
is there an opportunity to hear, just, in 30 or 60 seconds, what kind of, can you fill out some of the guidelines? I know Bob, you'd spoken to the desire to hold some and observe. What's your intention?
I mean, mine, just like anything right now, active transportation, underserved populations in areas that aren't getting funding, right? Or in areas that aren't seeing development dollars, right? The north end for me, we have 100,000 here, they're asked, it's just getting development funds, right? I just don't see that as warranted. These extra connections for us, like, our pet projects now are, connecting the trail to the mobile home park north of town, transit service to Deschutes River Woods, right? Where there's not, those equity mapping areas. And so that's for me. But at the same time, if the city or the county, just like, hey, we went through our 10 needs that are 300,000 and we rank them, then I'm happy to take take staff's recommendation on the top rank. From these, right, it's which one do you prefer of these two? And then to Janet's point, there's probably 10 more, right? And I just don't see these two as the top.
So if we could just maybe go around and provide some more of that direction, would that be helpful, Tyler?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like this is like really special funding, and given the opportunity, I largely consistent with what Bob just said. Opportunities for, we've seen in the pandemic, we did see reduced PMTs, but we also saw a spike in things like pedestrian injuries and fatalities. And so anything that we can do to try to address the needs of safety, people utilizing active transportation, and things with a network-wide benefit, I think I'd be really interested in hearing more about.
Agreed. Safety and bike and pedestrians. And if I understood, I think I kind of agree maybe with what Bob was saying about that, from the beginning, I had hoped we would prioritize, kind of keeping the money whole as opposed to very small little asks. That's just, kind of what I've been thinking all along, but
Bigger.
yeah, but then, you guys, this is hard.
It is hard.
We did. We just background, we looked at a number of really large projects and nothing, and the stuff we looked at,
Exactly.
that's why it's taken us so long to actually allocate the funding.
That's right.
The projects turned out to be too large. Our contribution was going to be a pittance of what was needed to build some of these bigger projects. And so, but it took us a year to figure that out, right? So that's why we're just finally in the process of allocating these funds to projects.
And I guess, for me, it really might be wanting to try and decide how another sweeper would fit with the request. That's just something I've known we've needed for a lot of years for accessibility for everyone, for bikes and pedestrians. And it's something we just don't have funding to be able to purchase otherwise.
Did we lose Chris?
I'm afraid we did. Chris Doty, are you still with us?
He is.
I am, sorry.
How about you, Chris? What should we do?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I had someone pop in here.
Just looking for an expression of values to provide some guidelines for a return to this conversation to evaluate proposals more holistically.
No, I can't disagree with that.
And have you got an idea in mind, what would that general priority be?
So just, and I'm always going to speak to maintenance and the nexus of the funding. So kind of what I was leaning into with regards to my speech there. This funding offset funding that was certainly intended for operations and maintenance. That would be my opinion, but I understand that's probably not the greater opinion of the folks in the room, and that's okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Can you tell me again, Janet? I'm sorry. It did sound, did you say the signal is a maintenance consideration? I thought you said that was why,
Yes.
perhaps why it wasn't included as a requirement with development.
Yes.
Is
It's not being reconstructed. It's part of
Right.
the maintenance and upgrading equipment.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Bob? You're
No.
still thinking maybe reserve?
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm fine with I just want to one time set the priorities, right? If we're going to decide versus just the next request type of activity
Right,
that.
yeah, okay. Tyler, what do you think? Does that give you any kind of direction at all?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
And I
Andrea?
think in the future, when we get, this is my own thoughts, when we get a chunk
Yeah.
of money like this, setting up like we did with the STBG dollars, we have a process around it.
Yes.
The process was set up through our TAC and our board, and then everybody comes at the same time
Mhm.
with projects that the board then decides comparatively what to fund.
And I thought we did a pretty good job with that the first time around. It's just that now we have more money, from my perspective. But thank you for that thought. Yes, I completely agree. Okay, we're gonna move on from COVID. We're gonna promise Janet that she's not gonna come in here and talk to us about a $50,000 ask again. I really do understand that you've spent a lot of time on this, tiny little thing.
It wasn't much time and I appreciate it. And I will tell you, anytime Tyler sends me an email saying I have money, you have projects, I
Okay,
can bring you something.
okay,
So
Good.
no,
And
yeah, I just
as
wanna
far
make
as I'm
sure we're
concerned,
aligned.
it's still on the list. As far as I'm concerned, it's very much still on our list.
I was gonna say,
We just are trying to decide if the list, really were expanded, where would that fit in priorities? So much of our job is prioritizing, right? Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 8. Tyler Dickey.
All right, we have two items here, two topics here. The first is potential sponsorship of the current Building Better Bend lecture series that's happening. The second is potential sponsorship of a Dutch active transportation workshop that's being organized in Bend. And so just a little bit of background, we had never been asked to sponsor anything until 2 years ago, I think, and we came to the board. Building a Better Bend back then had asked us to be a sponsor for a lecture that they were providing. And so we did a little bit of research to look and see how other MPOs around the state did it. We found that most MPOs do help provide sponsorships to lectures and workshops, that type of thing. But most do not have any specific process in place. It's more of if somebody comes and asks, then the the board will consider it. So it's usually just a request to the board and then try to show how it ties to the work and, goals and processes that we have in place. So the first, actually I'll introduce James Teeter is here, and you're a Building a Better Bend board member, correct?
I am on the board. It's coincidental that I'm here.
Right.
I'm really here for the Dutch transportation.
Yeah, so I'll walk through the Building a Better Bend request first, and then if I miss anything, he can jump in. So right now, Building Better Bend, they have a 3-part lecture series. It's underway. The first was already happened a few weeks ago. And it's really looking at, the first lecture looked back, what's happened over the last 50 years with Oregon's land use planning system. The next lecture is going to be, where are we going over the next 25 years? And then looking really beyond that, what happens 25 plus years from now? And they are still, Building Better Bend is still looking for support to keep those lectures for that lecture series. They've asked us to be what's called a partner sponsor, and that's a $500 cost. And with that comes some pre-event marketing as well as event day exposure. And for us, this lecture, we think it fits underneath our public participation in our work program, as well as partnerships and relationship building in our public participation plan. And so we are asking the board today to potentially consider sponsorship of this current lecture series.
Thank you. Any questions?
What's the budget of the public participation in the work program? Like, where the source of this?
Look, I've got it written here somewhere. It's within our work program, it's pretty small. I mean, it's $1,200 this year and $2,000 next year. But we do have, that's one line item in our materials and services part of our budget. And so we have the flexibility to move funding around within that, the M&S component of our budget. And so it's a sizable piece of it, but it's not in the scheme of our bigger budget, it's not that much money.
So I've heard fantastic things about this lecture series. The people that were able to attend the April talk spoke really highly of it, including at one of our city council meetings. I would love to support it if you feel like that money has not been, if that's not going to put undue pressure on other areas of operation. I'm supportive of it.
Yeah, and I think one thing I would say is, during COVID, we didn't spend any of those, or we spent almost nothing out of that line item over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. And so I don't think there's the pressure on our budget would be minimal, to award these funds.
For me, we are a planning organization. So, any question about funding, I always revert to, are we doing our planning? Do we have enough money for our planning? And I believe that public participation, education for the public is just a necessary part of that planning. I don't see how we get anywhere planning unless the public has some idea of what it is we're doing and why and where we're trying to head. So for me, this fits just fine within our core function of the MPO. And then the other thing I happen to know is that the city of Bend's own Robin Lewis spent 2 months last summer in the Netherlands, in Europe, biking around, looking at bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And, kind of the second half of that seems to me, now we bring them here in order to really get the very best use of that kind of investment we've already made. And so I'm in favor, and I would move approval.
And just to be clear,
Yeah.
for this one, the Dutch Active Transportation Workshop is the next item.
The next one?
Yes.
And
Okay.
Building a Better Bend one is the current one.
Oh, okay.
Those comments are.
I think they apply to either one, right?
I agree.
So this one still is, we got to educate people if we're going to do any planning. All the planning doesn't do any good if people think we're morons. So I'll move approval of MPO sponsorship of $500 for the 2023 Building a Better Bend lecture series.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from myself and a second from Mr. Townsend. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Great.
And now,
Yeah, so it's the same item.
Got it.
Tyler's gonna-
Tyler.
Yes.
Fancier slide.
There it is. Now we've got our Dutch.
Now,
ones.
I will turn this over to James, and then I think Robin's gonna
Great.
contribute as well.
Sorry if I spoiled, was a
No, it's
spoiler
perfect
there. Took your thunder.
Just to introduce myself, I'm James Teeter. I am a structural engineer at a local structural and civil firm. I am a licensed TE. I would call myself an advocate for better livability in Bend, and that's kind of who I come to you as. And so for me, I've been trying to figure out how to do better biking infrastructure because I even bike around on our bike lanes and I don't find it comfortable. And so I've, over the last few years, drawn a lot of really bad ideas of how we could improve. And it wasn't until this, spring that I really started studying how the Dutch design streets. And for me, it all clicked when I saw the equity piece, the stormwater piece, the material use, and it was just, light years ahead of where we were. And so I'm just super motivated to try and share what I learned. And I don't have it totally figured out. But that's kind of the point of wanting to bring some experts here. So yeah, the mission, the Dutch have ridership levels of 40%. Compare that to Bend's something like 2% and has not increased since we started putting in bike lanes. We know that clearly they're doing something right and we're not doing something right. It's for engineers, planners, advocates. Really, my goal is to get us all pulling on the same rope instead of, kind of butting heads at workshops or not workshops, open houses. Goals of a workshop would be to learn how to separate fast and slow traffic. And the Dutch have done this very effectively to the point that you would allow your small child to ride a long distance across town. The use of materials, you can kind of see in the background there, that is a bike lane or active mobility lane. And then there's like brick on each side. And the Dutch are very knowledgeable about how to use materials to just intuitively signal what should happen. So they do use signs for like wayfinding, but they believe that if you have to have a sign, you failed in design. And the red bike or the red active mobility space, that it's just red asphalt, it's shouldn't cost much more than black asphalt. And the difference to our green paint would be that it doesn't go away. It actually like contrasts the green trees and the green bushes that you put around. So in general, it just looks nice and it's a nice place to be and people want to move around in those spaces. And then the third goal is just to learn together, to have some of our advocates, our private engineers, our city engineers and planners on all those spectrums, kind of meet each other and talk and form some better relationships over 2 days. So yeah, that's what we're going for. Next slide. I think this is just, without going into the design of too much street stuff, this is a good representation of just the development of the Dutch street and how they really figured it out. And you can see on the top right where we do bulb out our sidewalks and we try to slow cars down, at intersections. And we do have our bike lane in the street there. The Dutch then figured out to use red asphalt and aprons. And then they moved that street or that active mobility space next to the sidewalk out of the street. And they have that buffer of parking or vegetation in between. And this has really enabled them to allow, older people that use, scooters to get around and your small children and, it connects to all parts of town like this. So they have an amazing biking system. And I honestly don't believe that there are biking people or car people or bus people. I really believe that everyone will just pick the easiest way to get around town and the nicest way to get around town. And that if we can make that an active mode, that we will also have some of the happiest people in the world, like the Dutch do. Yeah, next slide. So the plan for the workshop is we've met with this guy, Shores Van Duren, and this is kind of how he does things. We're planning on a 2-day intensive workshop. The first part is just educational, just spend a few hours learning about Dutch street design. And that would be open to city leaders as well. And then kind of the meat of the workshop is this part 2, where we break out into different groups and we kind of pick parts of town that we want to study. We want to do a case study where we're going to actually design these streets or these intersections. We kind of have to figure out which ones they are, where they are, but it's most probable that they would be upcoming streets or intersections that are in the Go-Bon that would be a good representation. And the third part would be coming back together and kind of discussing those designs with everyone and bringing some city leaders back to the table for that. And then the last piece and the most important piece to a lot of our advocates is bringing this to the public. So we're gonna have a lecture at Open Space Studio that would be very similar to what Build a Better Bend does by inviting a bunch of people, having an expert, and just bring some good time. People can network. Yeah, these 2 pictures, I took this picture riding home on Franklin. You can see the truck parked in the bike lane. It's very scary. And then on the right, just a typical street in the Netherlands. Any questions before I go to the budget on why we should do this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, this is just kind of our breakdown of what this costs. So Shores and his team, it's probably one other person. We're estimating that's going to be $22,000 for their rate. That paying them, it's more expensive for them because they're Dutch to come to the States and work in the States. And they do preparation, they do a follow-up report that includes their flights. There's some money in here for actually getting them, once they're in the States, to Bend. And we're planning on the city hall not being an expense, and that would be our preferred place of doing this. And $2,000 in here for materials and discretionary funds. And there's an asterisk down there related to that that'll get to. The public lecture, I expect to cost around $2,000. And our funding sources, right now we have tentative commitments from these sources, but $6,000 from the city of Bend, Bend Bikes, $5,000, Central Oregon Land Watch, $2,500. Ashley and Vance Engineering is donating the cost of lodging Shores and his team at our Airbnbs. Ashley and Vance is who I work with. And Luke Posey, I don't know if any of you know him, great human. And Build a Better Bend is also interested in covering the lecture part of this bit, at least recording the public lecture. And you will see that they are very fiscally conservative. They like to be smart with their money. And so I am personally engaged to kick in the rest of the funding for the venue as part of a contribution to Build a Better Bend that would pay for the venue.
James, just in the interest of time, and forgive me, I want to make sure that we just get a brief chance to hear from city staff about how this might fit with the city's transportation system plan, and then open it up for questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course, yes, no,
I
I
can
was
see the
looking at
corner
that
of the
clock.
clock over here.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, James.
No, thank you.
No, I think that's good timing. Yeah, so as Barb introduced, I was able to go on a trip through the University of Oregon's Sustainable Transportation class. It was a year-long class, and the culmination of the year was attending day in, day out discussions and field trips with 2 weeks in Denmark and 2 weeks in, I can't remember now, maybe it was a whole month in Denmark and a whole month in Amsterdam, I can't remember, Netherlands. And what struck me with both communities was they have the same goals as we do of crash reduction, safer streets for all, and VMT reduction. They do move a lot of cars in both of these communities. They have really, really large intersections, kind of like on the order of our 3rd Greenwood and 27th and Greenwood, but even bigger, like more turn lanes, more travel lanes, dual lefts and three through lanes, plus rights, but they still figured out a way to make it walkable and bikeable and transitable. And so they've got this methodology that works to create this separation of space. Granted, they have more space than we do, but all of their planning goals and policies and code all work together. And so I really am impressed with like just how to have that communication and what tweaks we might need in our facilities, different thinking on intersection operations and local street operations. And I got to meet Shores. Then he came to Bend and I took him on a bike tour and I showed him our best stuff. I showed him 14th Street had just been finished, which we had shared use path on both sides and buffered bike lanes and some central islands. And he just was like, why did you do it this way? And how's your ridership? And he's right, our ridership is still low on that corridor. Right. So we spent a lot of money, but we didn't quite achieve what we were hoping of, moving more people more efficiently. So it was interesting to kind of hear that because he kind of popped my bubble. I was like, well, this is the best we just did. And he was like, interesting. Anyways, the Dutch Cycling Embassy is really great. They do a lot of this worldwide. And so they're able to engage policymakers and engineers and advocates and designers. They've got a lot of experience in that. So I think they're a good aspect. I talked to Eugene, City of Eugene. They've used 2 of these workshops in the past 5 years. And they really appreciated the dialogue and the training that happened amongst staff. So I think it's a good value. I think it's great timing. It does feel a little rushed, but we're just trying to get these conversations in sync with the funding we have from the Go Bond and other CIP projects.
And to your question, I think we're still working on exactly what the best, like in a mad dash fashion, what would be the best sync and timing to the public meetings and design process of the different Go Bond projects. We have some ideas, we're still that.
I mean, I think it sounds like a great program, but for not a lot of money that potentially has a big impact on the design of things that could be really helpful. My question is, Tyler, what are some of the funding options that might be available for this?
I mean, my initial kind of feedback would be, we have $2,000 in our budget for this next fiscal year for public outreach and engagement kind of activities. So some percentage of that could go towards it, which is not a lot towards the 10,000. Then the only other thing that I could really think of would be, potentially utilizing some of our COVID funding for this.
Are there costs to attendees?
No, we're trying to get the designers and the city staff in the same room. So we were thinking no.
So then this would be, I mean, given that we just had a great conversation about COVID relief funding, I feel like in the scheme of the amount of money remaining, I mean, this is not a huge amount, but Bob, what are your thoughts about using any of it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have a problem contributing on these things. For me, it's always, and I mean, sounds petty as I even say it out loud. It's just like it's primary City of Bend. If City of Bend's contributing 6,000, I'm fine matching or something, but for us to pay more seems, awkward when we do have other entities involved, right? Versus, without knowing the streets and stuff. And I mean, if we say 10,000, I mean, I know it's pennies on the dollar. So what are we, it's a value to me, to spend MPO dollars on. That would be my only comment when we see these types of things come through.
Thanks. Chris?
I've kind of said my piece on a variety of things regarding expenditures here today, but channeling my inner Commissioner Chang, I know he'd be excited about this. I really don't have anything to add if it's what the MPO wants, and this is a one city MPO. County doesn't dip its toes in it a lot, so if this is within the city's desire to want to do that, I think we'd be okay with that.
Thank you. Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, well, I think we just need to determine
I know.
the amount. I mean, I feel like I want to be sensitive to Bob's comments. We won't be able to fund the full amount unless we use some of the COVID relief funds. So do we want to use the full 2,000 for public outreach and then the balance with COVID relief funds, or what do you think, Barbara?
I'm okay with that. Are you thinking of the entire 10,000?
I mean, if we said maybe not the entire 10,500, maybe he said 10,000, 8,000, something substantial that would, I think, make it happen. Hopefully, I mean, if there's no, would there be an objection to funding it at the full amount? You okay with that?
You've been through everyone you can think of, that list of funding sources. You've knocked on every door you can think of.
I mean, I like that.
It's
we have
timing.
almost a half dozen community partners listed there that have some, including private individuals.
Yes, Tyler?
I was just wondering, this just came to mind. In the past, ODOT's TGM program sometimes would help sponsor these kinds of events. I don't know if they do that anymore or not, but I'm wondering if that's another potential avenue to check into.
I don't know.
What's the magnitude of that kind of sponsorship possibility?
Several $1,000s, I would think, potentially, but I'd have to look. And I said, I don't know if they still do that or not. I mean, that was something they did in the past, years ago, but.
So can we move to authorize Tyler for the full amount with the expectation that you look into the possibility of another grant? And so would not potentially, if you found another grant, would not use the full amount?
Are you talking about the standard TGM process as it exists today?
No, they have, there's the TGM's Transportation Growth Management Program that ODOT's had in place for, 20 plus years now. And the bulk of those monies go for planning projects, updating transportation system plans and that type of thing. But they also have funding set aside for what's called quick response projects, where they'll come in and look at if there's a development that's happening, there's questions about it, they'll come in and bring in architects and landscape architects and help you figure out how to modify things. But they also have a little slice, they used to have a slice of money that was set aside for lectures and presentations and that type of thing. And so I think we would just have to reach out to ODOT's TGM folks in Salem and see if that piece of that program still exists, and if it does, what we would need to do to potentially seek funding for this workshop.
So we could conceivably, what do you think about the idea of authorize for the full amount, but then ask the executive director to look into an additional grant? And if that's possible, then pursue that option. That's
Yes. How are we gonna say it?
Well, and I guess, so what's the funding split in terms of like
So
MPO
we're
operating
gonna
budget
do-
versus COVID?
We're gonna cover the entire public lecture cost of $2,000 with our public outreach funds. I move that the Bend MPO contribute $2,000 to this project from public outreach.
Okay.
There's one motion. Looking for a second.
Second, that's fine.
We have a motion and a second from Counselor Campbell and Mr. Townsend to dedicate $2,000 from our public outreach fund. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. Now, would we also like to make a further contribution from our COVID relief funds? I move that we make a contribution up to $8,500 contingent on staff looking into ODOT funding for a portion of that amount. That's actionable.
I think so.
Okay, looking for a second.
Sounds like it.
I'll second that.
Great. We have a motion and a second on the floor. The motion is for the MPO to pick up as much as $8,500. And we're also going to check for ODOT funding. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Cameron has her,
Yes, Tyler.
Cameron has her hand up.
Yes, Cameron, I was afraid you would.
Well, we are very enthusiastic today. Who
Yeah.
seconded the motion that on the 8,500?
That was Mr. Townsend.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That was an easy question. I have failed again to get us through an agenda on time. I think we just have to table the rest of this agenda.
Those are really aggressive.
I know it, you guys, I'm sorry. I really was trying to get us through here. Next
Well,
thing.
we can push the MTP, the goals and policies and that that's a long discussion anyway.
Okay.
So that one can just go to the next.
Okay, number 10, has everyone had a chance to review letters of support from the city of Bend on the CET project applications?
I gotta jump. I have a hard 1:30 phone call, but I don't have any problems with the letter.
Okay,
so.
how about you, Chris? Can we approve letters in support of city of Bend CET projects?
Absolutely.
Okay, I move that we do that.
I second that.
Second from Counselor Mendez, all in favor, hands up.
Aye.
Okay, so we have passed number 10 and others we've just got to put on till later, everybody. I am sorry. Next policy board meeting is June 16th at noon. It will probably be right here. Any last public comments? All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, Tyler.
Cameron?
Next time, we're gonna try putting how many minutes we think each thing will take. And I'll bring a timer and hire an auctioneer.
Cameron, do you have any
Stacked
questions?
against me.
No, I just forgot to lower my hand. Just a moment
Thank you
ago.
so much, Cameron.
All
You
right.
do a great job.
I'm
trying
going to
keep
stop
track.
recording then.
Yeah.
And Barb, thanks for these.
Thank you.
Tyler, the quick response
Yeah,
program,
I'm glad
Yeah.
that
that
does still
was what we
exist,
needed.
Yeah.
but it's fuzzy as if
Thank you.
we'll actually fund something like this. So I can contact.
You could, that'd be awesome.
Okay, Tyler, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm serious. Next time, honestly, maybe we'll try on the agenda, 15 minutes on this one, 20
well,
minutes
I
on
think we
this.
just we had so much on it.
I know,
you
I know.
so,
Okay, but we're okay,
yes,
right? These
yeah.
things are not
So actually,
time
thank you.
sensitive.
Sure,
We
here,
don't
I
need
will
to
have you
schedule a
sign
whole new meeting.
a whole bunch of
Okay,
times.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Have you sign
Money to
both of
spend
those?
takes time. We don't have the old MPO that just wanted it all go to David for pavement protection. Those were the easy days of the MPO. Nothing but roads, nothing but roads. All righty.
So those are the two resolutions for the
Okay.
work program and the MTIP, and then these are the Signatures for the key support letters.
Great. Thank you, Tyler, for getting this together. Oh, my signature is getting messier. I always wonder if they're going to accept my ballot. Okay, that's yours. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much.
All right.
How's the new Hobie search?
So you wouldn't believe how many applications.
I said to Tyler, I was asking him because the city, I think it's pretty specific. We have to advertise statewide, we have to, whatever. And I was saying to him that, I hope we get more than 3. Did we get more than 300?
I think the only surprise for me is that we didn't get anybody internally.
Oh, that is kind of weird.
I mean, unless it could have been, so we had an initial, like a
Yeah.
close deadline, right? If you submit your application by this point, we'll review it as the first group. And then since